Some huge news dropped a few days back. There was a massive, massive terror attack that hit Russia. So I'm going to walk you through here. There's a Vox article breaking it down for us. But suffice to say up front, there's quite a bit of speculation and conspiracy theorizing going on all different corners of the internet, trying to figure out what really happened in this instance. So I'll let you know what I think is most likely. But they say here, the battle for blame over a deadly terror attack in Moscow. All signs point to ISIS in a terrorist attack that killed over 130 people near Moscow. But Vladimir Putin is connecting it to the war in Ukraine. So look, when the news first came out, I have to say, of course, my first thought is, damn, it looks like this is some sort of a... When all we knew was, you know, the numbers and they attacked some concert, some band was playing. My first thought was, Occam's razor, of course, it's Ukraine. They're literally in a war with Ukraine. Occam's razor is the people they're at war with are doing some sort of retaliatory terror attack in Moscow. So that was definitely my first thought. But then the more you read through it, the more you see that doesn't quite add up. So here's what they say here. Russia's deadliest terrorist attack in decades may not be directly related to the ongoing war in Ukraine, but that doesn't mean it won't have implications for the future of that conflict. In fact, the horrific attack has already become one more battle in the ongoing information war between Russia, Ukraine, and Ukraine's Western allies, including the U.S. The nature and timing of the attack, as well as its alleged perpetrators, have all combined to make this tragedy fertile ground for conspiracy theories and motivated reasoning. At least 133 people were killed in the attack in the Crocus City Hall theater just outside Moscow on Friday, where a concert by the veteran Russian rock band Picnic was happening. A group of gunmen wearing tactical gear and carrying automatic weapons shot concertgoers and set fire to the building. Grisly videos circulating on social media seen by Vox show the attackers firing on defenseless people crouched on the ground. With over 100 people wounded, the death toll is likely to rise, but it is already higher than the 132 people killed in the 2002 Moscow theater hostage crisis, an event which it shared some disturbing resemblances, and is likely to be the second worst terrorist attack in Russian history after the 2004 Beslan school hostage crisis in the country's North Caucasus region, which resulted in more than 300 deaths. The Islamic State terrorist network has claimed responsibility for the attack, and U.S. intelligence officials have said they believe it was specifically the work of the group's Afghan affiliate, ISIS-K. The U.S. Embassy in Moscow had issued a warning on March 7th, advising U.S. citizens to avoid large gatherings due to reports that extremists have imminent plans to target large gatherings in Moscow, to include concerts. Russian authorities also claimed earlier this month to have foiled an ISIS attack on a synagogue in Moscow. In a video statement released Saturday, President Vladimir Putin said that 11 people have been arrested, including the 4 perpetrators of the attack who had fled the scene. Authorities in Moscow say the 4 were not Russian citizens. So I think they might go on to explain this a little bit, but man, they tortured the shit out of the people that they captured. I think they cut one of their ears off. Just brutal videos floating around social media on this. Colin Clark, a terrorism analyst with the Sufin Center, said that evidence suggested the 4 gunmen had experience and training. Quote, if you look at the videos of this attack, the way they shot and even the spacing between them when they carry out the attacks, it's clear they were well trained, Clark told Vox. It doesn't seem like these were just local guys who were imbibing ISIS propaganda and decided to do something. I would put money on them being trained in Afghanistan. So by the way, the Taliban, which is now the government in Afghanistan, came out and condemned this attack and said, in no way, shape, or form do we support this. We're against this. And this is a theme that we've seen for a long time, is that even among extremist groups, they say, man, these ISIS guys are way too extreme. We don't support these guys at all. What they're doing is way beyond the pale. Why would an ISIS offshoot attack Russia? Islamist extremist group like ISIS-K have long-standing grievances against Moscow dating back to the Soviet war in Afghanistan in the late 1980s, as well as the Russian Federation's brutal counterinsurgency campaigns in Chechnya and the North Caucasus in the 1990s and 2000s, and its support for Bashar al-Assad government in Syria. More recently, ISIS-K carried out a suicide attack targeting the Russian embassy in Kabul in 2022. So yeah, there's a bunch of potential motives here. One of them is, as they point out, Putin and Russia are big allies with Bashar al-Assad. In fact, they help sort of prop up that government. Bashar al-Assad is, he's a Ba'athist. He's a Shia Alawite. And you had this uprising with both the Free Syrian Army, which are viewed as like the moderate rebels, but also al-Nusra Front and a bunch of jihadist groups that tried to bring down the Assad government. And so you have a little bit of like a Sunni Shia split there, and ISIS, of course, is a Sunni organization. They could want retribution and retaliation for the propping up of Assad's government. That's one thing. Everything that happened with Chechnya. Chechnya is a very Muslim region within Russia, and there are various separatist attempts that took place throughout recent history there, and so it could be over that as well. There's a bunch of different potential motives. Of course, it just looks like, man, this timing is wild because Russia's literally in the middle of a war with Ukraine, and so the timing seems kind of crazy. The simple explanation that ISIS was responsible would be an inconvenient one for Putin. It would mean that he had ignored the U.S. warning of an imminent attack, which at the time he dismissed as blackmail intended to destabilize Russian society. In fairness, he would definitely not be the only world leader to recently ignore such a warning. It would also be another instance, along with the remarkable detailed U.S. warnings of Russian war plans ahead of the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, when America's spies seemed to know more about what was happening in Russia than Putin's own security services. So it's not that surprising that Russian authorities are already assigning blame elsewhere. So then they go on to explain here, Putin comes out and gives a speech and basically points the finger at Ukraine, which, you know, if you guys, the second I saw that, I went, uh-oh, because then that means expect a massive escalation in the Russian aggression in Ukraine, right? I mean, for a while they had sort of fought to a stalemate, but, you know, it's ramping up again, and it looks like they could be even more aggressive now. So this is a wild, wild situation, man. It's terrible that over 130 people were killed, all innocent civilians just going to a concert. The conspiracy theorizing, I would say, the main one, of course, is Ukraine. That Ukraine is behind this. Like I said, at the very beginning of it, Occam's razor felt like, well, it probably is Ukraine. But then you look at the specifics of how it happened and who was involved and the nature of the attack. It actually doesn't look like Ukraine in that instance, but I could understand somebody thinking, oh, it's probably Ukraine. Russia's literally at war with Ukraine. I understand that. But there was also a bunch of fake information floating around out there, like some people created some fake identification card, which made one of the attackers Ukrainian, which is not the case at all. That turned out to be totally fake. I saw some breakdown of that, some fact check of that online as well. But the other, conspiracies here are the CIA and the U.S., and the other one is Israel. Plenty of people are pointing the finger at Israel. And the link that they make is, hey, do you guys remember when Iran got attacked by ISIS? And it was right in the midst of what was happening in Gaza, but there was also a lot of like tit for tat and back and forth with the Iranian government. And of course, Netanyahu has constantly been pushing for years to overthrow the Iranian government. And so the timing of that was just too perfect, where it almost seemed like ISIS did the attack, but it almost looks like they were working with Israel in tandem to do it. And there's also, I'm sure you guys have seen, there's a number of articles out there from back in the day. ISIS is an enemy of Hamas. Hamas is an enemy of ISIS. There was one time ISIS attacked within Israel, and then they apologized to Israel. So it's like, well, why are you apologizing? Because for geostrategic reasons, they could potentially work together. But anyway, the point is, when ISIS attacked ISIS attacked Iran, the timing was questionable and sketchy, that it looks like Israel could be behind that, right? And so people are making a similar connection now, like, well, if ISIS just worked hand in glove with Israel and did an attack in Iran, then why wouldn't Israel also be doing that in Russia? But that theory actually falls apart kind of quickly, because international relations between Israel and Russia are actually good. Like, they actually are allies and trading partners. And in fact, Israel did not agree with the U.S. to put sanctions on Russia when they invaded Ukraine. And Israel sent no weapons to Russia when, of course, we were trying to prod all of our allies to help out, pitch in, and send weapons to Ukraine. So relations between Putin and Netanyahu, Israel and Russia, they're actually, like, good. So the idea that Israel would be behind it honestly doesn't make any sense at all. And the CIA one, look, I understand the CIA does a million things that are horrible all the time. It's not just a thing from back in the day, as many people would have you believe. It's also a thing that they do currently that the CIA meddles in other countries and tries to overthrow governments, and we've seen it time and time again. But again, it just doesn't add up in this scenario, because if that was the case, why would the U.S. have issued a warning in early March that, hey, we have evidence that we have some intelligence that there's going to be some sort of an attack in Moscow? Why would they have warned about that attack if they were later on going to commit it? That doesn't really add up either. So, and then the final, the cherry on top here, the final nail in the coffin of all the theories, I think, is that ISIS came out and took responsibility for it. Then they saw a lot of people downplaying it and denying it and conspiracy theorizing. And then they came out again and were like, no, guys, seriously, we did this. And then they had to come out again and release video that they had of it. So it almost certainly was ISIS. It's just because of the political situation going on around the world now, it's almost hard for anybody to believe anything, right? Because it's just, there's so much going on. There's Russia invading Ukraine and doing a war with Ukraine. There's Israel trying to wipe Gaza off the map and ethnically cleanse them and genocide them. And there's so much chaos. There's so much instability that, it's almost like you're never going to take something at face value. Everything at face value is initially going to seem like it's the Lee Harvey Oswald story, the official story about the assassination of JFK, where everybody's like, that doesn't make sense. Even to this day, over 50% of Americans are like, I don't buy that. That doesn't make sense. So everybody's initial reaction is sort of like that. But look, on this front, I could say I'm relatively convinced it adds up that it was an ISIS attack. The motive is a little bit of a deeper question, right? That I don't know if it has to do with the Syria thing. I don't know if it has to do with Chechnya. I don't know, right? But they tortured the shit out of these guys. And it was a horrific, brutal attack. Again, over 130. Last number I saw was 137 and climbing. So what's important from now, though, is how this is going to be used. And it already looks like Putin is pointing the finger at Ukraine. So buckle up, because I don't know if he really believes it or he's just using it. I genuinely don't know. But the end result is the same either way, that he's going to ramp up against Ukraine, and that is a scary thing for the entire world. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.